You know that moment when you're scrolling through someone's Instagram and you see the watch? The very specific, very deliberately angled watch shot. Or the airport lounge photo where the caption is just a single globe emoji. No context, just vibes. Just wealth vibes. And you don't know why, but something about it feels a little off. Like a movie set that's beautiful from the front but has nothing behind it. Here's the thing, though. I want you to sit with this. That feeling you get when you see it, that slight discomfort, that's not judgment. That's recognition. Because almost all of us have done some version of this. Maybe it wasn't the watch, maybe it was ordering something at a restaurant you couldn't afford and pretending to glance at the menu casually. Maybe it was mentioning a neighborhood you live near rather than in. Maybe it was a bag, a certain kind of bag that was a stretch, but you bought it anyway, and you know exactly why. So what's actually going on psychologically when people perform wealth they don't quite have yet? Let's start with something called symbolic self-completion theory. It was developed by psychologists Robert Wickland and Peter Gollwitzer back in the 1980s, and the idea is almost painfully simple. When we feel like we haven't fully become the person we want to be, we reach for symbols of that identity to compensate. A person who wants to be seen as intellectual surrounds themselves with books. A person who wants to be seen as athletic wears the gear. And a person who wants to be seen as wealthy, they buy the signal. The fascinating part is that the symbol doesn't just fool other people, it fools you, briefly. The brain experiences a kind of temporary relief when the external symbol matches the internal aspiration. You put on the watch, and for a moment, the gap between who you are and who you want to be narrows just a little. It's not delusional. It's actually a deeply human coping mechanism. The problem is, it's a loop, because the relief fades, and then you need the next symbol and the next one. Now here's where it gets really interesting and a little uncomfortable. A lot of this behavior isn't really about other people at all. We assume it is. We assume the person posting the business class seat photo is performing for their followers. But research in social comparison theory, pioneered by Leon Festinger, suggests something more internal. We compare ourselves not to everyone, but to people just slightly above us. Our cousin who got the promotion, the friend from school who seems to have figured it out, the neighbor with the new car. And in that comparison, the appearance of wealth becomes a way of saying, I'm not behind, I'm still in the race. There's a quiet desperation in that. And I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's deeply, deeply human. We are social animals, hardwired for status. For most of human history, your position in the group determined whether you ate, whether you made it, whether you survived. The anxiety around being perceived as low status isn't vanity. It's ancient. It's evolutionary. Your nervous system genuinely does not fully distinguish between being poor and being unsafe. That's why a luxury purchase can feel, in the moment, like relief, like exhaling. But here's the layer that doesn't get talked about enough. The people who most aggressively signal wealth, the ones who need you to know about the brand, the trip, the table they got, are often people for whom wealth represents something far more personal than money. For some, it's about finally proving something to a parent who doubted them. For others, it's about escaping a childhood where there wasn't enough, where not enough became a kind of shame that still lives in the body. When you grew up watching your parents stress about bills, money stops being just money. It becomes proof. It becomes armor. And buying things that look like wealth is a way of wearing that armor in public, even when you're not sure you fully earned it yet. Psychologists call this compensatory consumption. You consume not from abundance, but from a sense of lack. And the cruel irony is that it almost always makes the lack worse, because now you're paying for an illusion, while the actual gap between your finances and your self-image quietly widens. There's a beautiful and slightly tragic study I want to mention here. Researchers at the University of Chicago found that people who feel economically threatened are more likely to purchase products that signal high social status, even when those products are clearly financial stretches.
What's even more telling is that this behavior actually decreased when participants were first given an opportunity to reflect on values related to non-money, like their relationships, their creativity, their sense of humor, as if reminding themselves of who they were outside the financial story, loosened the grip. That tells you everything. The hunger for status symbols isn't really about stuff. It's about self-worth that got tangled up with net worth somewhere along the way. So what do you do with all of this? I think the first thing is to just notice it without shame. If you've bought something to be seen a certain way, you're not broken. You're a person living in a culture that has, for decades, told you that your value is visible, that it can be measured, that it lives in the label on your jacket or the neighborhood on your driver's license. That's not a personal failure. That's a design problem with the world you were handed. The second thing is to get curious about what the symbol is standing for, because there's always something underneath the thing. The bag isn't really a bag, it's a message. And if you can get quiet enough to hear what message you're trying to send and to whom, you often find that the real conversation you need to have isn't with your Instagram followers, it's with yourself. Or maybe with a version of yourself from 20 years ago who needed someone to say, "You're going to be okay." And maybe the most radical thing you can do in a world built on appearances is to stop performing for people you don't even particularly like in pursuit of a version of yourself you were told to want. That's not easy, but that's the kind of rich that actually compounds. If this made you think about something or someone, I'd love to know in the comments. And if you want more of this kind of psychology content, the subscribe button is right there.